Mr. P.V. Ramesh, the CMD at REC. And let's talk about what really are the three key questions that the market has for REC right now. Mr. Ramesh, morning. Thanks so much for joining in. Firstly, sir, the government has imposed a loan restriction on lending to discom sector. How much exposure do you now have to discoms? And what impact would you have of the government restrictions on your margin as well as loan book growth?
Good morning, and thank you for having me with you. And let me first say this, that these are very most exciting times for the power sector at large. First and foremost, the government has a very clear vision of providing quality power at an affordable rate to all citizens of this country in the shortest possible time. And this is backed up with concrete plans in the form of programs in the form of Saubhagya, which seeks to electrify all the remaining unelectrified 4 crore households before end of the next financial year. There's a Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana, which is strengthening the distribution infrastructure. There's above all the integrated power development scheme, which is strengthening the infrastructure in the urban areas. This together, government is making a grant financing to the tune of about 1 lakh crores. I mean, this is the biggest investment that's being made in strengthening the distribution infrastructure. In this regard, you are well aware, government has launched the UDAY scheme to revitalize the distribution companies, to unburden them from the debt. And you are also aware that 75% of the debt has been taken over by the state governments, and that has been prepaid to the lending agencies, including REC, which is about 44,000 crores. And the part of this UDAY deal, as a part of the revitalization, is apart from the financial restructuring, which results in the increased fiscal space much required for a capital investment, it also includes operational efficiency improvements, investment in infrastructure. Now, there's a very clear roadmap that each of the distribution companies in this country have signed along with the state governments and the Government of India Ministry of Power, laying down specific benchmarks and the milestones by which they will reach power for all. And one of the important parameters is to reduce the technical and commercial losses by 2019 March to 15%. And that's the roadmap which the ministry is pursuing. Let me clarify that there is no ban on lending. This is a commercial decision which REC board makes. What is important here is essentially to support, because REC is not merely a financing institution, we are also a nodal agency for implementing government programs. We coordinate, we support. We also are involved actively in strengthening the capacity of the state power utilities. And we are also have a very diversified investment portfolio that stretches across the private public sectors across the country in the entire power value chain, including renewables. We are one of the most important players in the renewable segment. So the distribution companies are receiving a massive infusion of grant from Government of India in the form of both Saubhagya, Deen Dayal Upadhyay and IPDS. In addition to that, an adequate fiscal space has been created under UDAY in order for them to enhance the investments in the distribution companies. So it should really be a good time for us. It has been a good time for us, and our loan book is growing. Our first 9 months, our disbursements have gone up substantially, almost by 45. Our sanctions have gone up by 45%. Our disbursements are growing. Our growth momentum continues. So I want to clarify that there is no ban on disbursement to distribution companies. I think that is a misinterpretation of what has been said.
Okay. Okay, fair point, Mr. Ramesh. So you're just saying that you as a financer are just maintaining some discretion. Agreed to that. Would you say maintaining this discretion, would there be any impact on your margin and loan book growth? Which discoms are under stress and which are performing better? If you could highlight that for us.
Now, the distribution companies across the country have shown substantial improvement in their performance since the unburdening of the debt. Almost about 15,000 crore debt servicing burden has come down on the discoms collectively. And there's a very close monitoring of the performance in terms of the operational efficiency, the cost of supply, the gap between the supply and the revenue recovery, the transmission, the technical and commercial losses. Now, all these parameters are being closely monitored at all levels. I mean, that is from the level of the distribution to the distribution companies, to the state government and the central government. All discoms across the country have shown progress. I mean, obviously you are aware that the different distribution companies have different levels of performance efficiency, but all of them uniformly have showing improvement. Some of them have made substantial gains. Overall, every single distribution company is doing a very impressive progress. And let me also clarify that none of the distribution companies have ever defaulted on their payment obligations. They continue to service the debt promptly. They continue to borrow from us, not only as a counterpart funding for the government programs, but in addition to strengthen the overall infrastructure in the distribution segment in order to support the government programs like Saubhagya, which is a very ambitious program to reach 4 crore households in 400 days. So it's a very encouraging response, notwithstanding what some skeptics might have to say.
What about the exposure to private sector? We all know that there is an issue with thermal power capacity, especially in the private domain. If I read through the notes of your con call also, you've raised concerns that, look, you have exposure to private sector and the conditions there are not stable.
Let me also clarify that 85% of our loan portfolio is to the public sector, essentially the state utilities, GenCos, TransCos and the distribution companies. It's 15% is to the private sector, of which 13% is in the generation segment and the rest is in the distribution and the transmission, essentially in the transmission segment. So in this, the stress has been in the thermal power projects, as you are well aware. Let me also clarify that REC has the lowest NPAs among all the financing institutions in the power sector segment. I mean, we have a gross NPAs of 2.9% and the net NPAs of 2.1%. And then we have been scrupulously making provisioning, number one, in terms of complying with the RBI regulations. Number two, we've been making every possible effort to ensure that these assets are standard, because we are part of a consortium in virtually every single of these projects. And then we are working with the other financial institutions, and we are very optimistic that the situation will improve. Each of these power projects, many of them are commissioned, many of them are generating power. It is simply that some of them, for reasons beyond their control, are unable to sustain the revenue stream in order to service the debt. So I think it's a fair point to say that there are a number of efforts that are afoot now, along with the other lenders, and especially in the light of the RBI's directives, to see that these assets are restored back to being standard. And I do not foresee any stress on the REC assets in the coming days.
So just to get closing comments, the sense which I have got from some smart investors and some industry observers is that UDAY scheme has not taken up the way it should have. Lot was indicated, lot was promised, but at state level there seems to be an issue. Are you getting a sense that lending to discoms now will be a challenge given the kind of financial state they are in? Also what I understand is the kind of power offtake they are doing also significantly lower than what they indicated a couple of years ago.
Okay, let me say this, that the UDAY is a comprehensive scheme, and these are the problems with the distribution companies is accumulated over several decades. And because the attention that had been paid to the generation segment has not been paid to the distribution segment, and that's precisely the reason why the government came up with the UDAY scheme. And it's really been a year since the scheme is really in operation. I mean, apart from the financial restructuring. Now, as I said earlier, the important part of it is the governance reform within the discoms, the operational efficiency improvement, investment in the technology infrastructure. All these things are medium-term gestation projects, and they are all in afoot at the moment as we speak. So, I mean, what we need to measure is, I mean, this is not a miracle that happens overnight. So there are two things that one needs to see. One is that are there signs that the green shoots that the overall performance parameters are improving? My answer is a resounding yes across the distribution segment. The second is there a demand for investment in the capex? Yes, there is. Apart from what the government of India is providing as grant, there is a further investment that's being made in distribution segment. However, are there issues? Yes, of course. I mean, there is given the diversity of our country, given the diversity of the performance efficiency among the discoms across the country, it would take time. Some of the discoms are already well ahead of the curve. They are already with the AT&C losses of less than 10%. The surplus revenue. So we have to understand this in the long-term perspective of, are they marching in the right direction and at the expected pace? The answer is yes.
Okay, Mr. Ramesh, just one final quick question. Is it true that you're considering an FY19 market borrowing plan? Are you planning to raise funds?
We continue to raise funds both in the domestic market and the international market. We just raised $300 million bonds in the international market last week. We continue because of the demand for financing across the power value chain, and especially in the emerging technologies, the renewable powers, the new technologies like electric vehicles, charging infrastructure. These are all opportunities that we have. So we continue to raise the resources that we need to finance these new projects that are coming aboard. So we have maintained a loan book growth, notwithstanding 44,000 crore prepayment under UDAY. Our loan book has grown 11% in the first 9 months, and we are very optimistic that we will sustain the momentum.
What is your FY19 funding requirement? Just give me the number.
We still have to, our board is still considering this. I mean, this certainly would be 15% higher than the current year's funding requirements.
Oh, okay, fair point. We'll go back to the drawing board and I'm sure we can come up with that calculation. Thanks, Mr. Ramesh, for taking the time out and speaking with us. Good chatting with you as always.